Hey, what's up, y'all? It's your boy, Church of Caboose. I'm back, baby. I'm back. Took a while off, for a long while, but I'm back. And I figured what a better way to come back than to do a video, good old Church of Caboose style, on how to do the solo flawless Grasp of Avarice, so that way you can get that pretty cool looking pirate ship. Now when I do this whole guide thing, it's going to be based off of the assumption you're on a warlock. I'll tell you more for the fellow average, nighttime gamers like myself, why I think Warlock is the best way to go in general when you're trying to do this like solo top end of game content kinds of things, because normally I main a Titan, and we're going to try to give some just specific stuff. Mostly we're going to be focusing on the two boss fights just because the rest of it doesn't really tend to take a whole lot. However, I will be for sure to let the Sparrow part and things like that play out so you can see exactly how I did it, and hopefully it will help you out. So that's going to be what this video is about. So if you do find this to be helpful, I would love it if you commented down below, specifically, like what part of it was helpful, as well as if you find any other things that work well, like the weapons that work well for me and that I suggest may not be what you find to be the best. So if you want to be like, hey, this glacial chasm was pretty nifty because I don't really end up using it, you never know. It might help somebody out. So do that. And don't forget to, of course, subscribe. So let's go ahead and get on into the video. We're going to kick it off with why I am on a Warlock, and I think you should too. Warlocks. I think Warlocks are fantastic to do endgame content, especially if you're by yourself, because of the well ability, because you got the healing grenade when you're on that middle tree solar warlock subclass, benevolence dawn or whatever it's called, but normally the slang is well lock, and then you got the healing rift, and of course you have the well, which is basically plant that puppy down, stand there, and put that boss to sleep with sleeper. Like, that's why Warlock is fantastic. And of course, with the top tree Dawnblade, you got like the double dash, you can float around and like shoot your guns at the same time, and that just works out really well, in my opinion, for doing like all the jump puzzle stuff. Another big advantage of the well is you can throw on Luna faction boots, which make you do your faster reloads, but we'll get more into that kinds of stuff when we actually talk about the boss fights. And the gameplay here, as I talk about Warlocks, is hopefully going to be showing you guys how just to do the maze real quick. There's just that one part, you got that giant open room, and you got like those doors on the sides, you gotta jump around, that I find to be a lot easier with the top tree Dawnblade, because you can kind of zip around and shoot and float, and so hopefully I have the gameplay here where you can kind of just see that. I found that Shrieker in this part to be very challenging otherwise, because like I don't know if they patched it. I had watched someone else's guide, and they're like, hey man, shoot through the fence. And I was like, but dude, the fence is blocking me. I can't land shots on that Shrieker. So I had to try to figure out how to get it done. And so that's why I love doing Warlock. Just some kind of generic dungeon tips here is if you're trying to do your first ever solo flawless, it could take you a while. If you're following much stuff on my channel, I did solo flawless prophecy, my first ever solo flawless dungeon, and that took me a long time. I want to say it was a lot of practice over about 2 months before I ended up actually getting it done. This dungeon took me like 3 days, so it's a lot easier, I think. It's possible because I've already done a solo flawless dungeon that maybe like my skills went up or something, and so it just didn't take quite as long to figure the stuff out. But I feel like this is a way easier dungeon. Part of why I think that is because when I looked up stats the other day, like the total number of people that did solo flawless prophecy, or percentage rather, was like I think 7% ish, something like that. And then when I had looked up on Braytech, this is where I found all the info. Currently, like 3.5% of players had done Grasp of Avarice solo flawless, and since prophecy's been out for like a year and a half ish, and Grasp of Avarice has been out for about a month, I believe. Like, that just should tell you, based off numbers at least, that this is potentially an easier dungeon. So if you're wanting to do your first ever solo flawless dungeon, which some friends of mine are, this is a fantastic one to do on your first time. I also just think it's a lot of fun, but we'll talk more about that stuff later. So hopefully we have the gameplay going through. We're just going to really just mainly just talk about the two boss fights, but I will just have like the Sparrow footage just in there so you can just see exactly how I go. So let's go ahead and just first talk about the Ogre fight. what better way to start talking about like boss fights than to talk about what I think would work really well for like loadouts and things like that. So I had two different loadouts. One was for anything that was like jump, puzzle, or the Sparrow stuff because you know you want more mobility and more speed. So like when we're doing the jump puzzle and like the Sparrow part, I was just doing Wither Horde, the new Battler BR pulse rifle. I just happen to have a pretty fun roll that I enjoy using, and then the Halo sword with Eager's Edge, so you can zip around. You might have noticed a little bit of why I like using that and the jump puzzle part. It just helps a lot with just like covering a lot of distance, kind of gives some forgiveness. If you like accidentally miss jump, you can just like whoop, zip out that sword, light attack, fly across the room, and save the encounter. So that was like my like flying around jumping puzzle kind of a loadout. Now when we have the actual boss stuff, where you got the ogre fight and the actual boss fight, I used the Fatebringer hand cannon. It's the time loss version. I mostly was using that though because of Firefly and explosive payload. I just found it worked really well for clearing out some ads. I'm also just pretty partial to hand cannons. Then in my energy slot, I used the Cartesian fusion rifle. Mostly because the God roll became available the other day. I grabbed it, and I really hope you guys did because like Cartesian has been talked about as being really, really good, and that roll had Lead from Gold and Vorpal, which is fantastic because like Vorpal does extra damage to bosses as well as like knights when you have to get those motes from the ogre fight, which we'll talk more here soon, as well as you know you can proc that particle deconstruction a little bit faster with it because like with Glaciocasm, when I was using that originally, it takes more time to get that shot off. So like if you mistime it, it's just more time that you lose out on DPS. And then in the heavy slot, I used the sleeper because what better way to put that boss to sleep than to use the sleeper? Hopefully that's a good joke. I don't know. I like it. So that's kind of like the loadout stuff, some mods, particle deconstruction. I kept on arc resist the whole time on my chest armor piece just because like it seems like there's a lot of arc. I don't know. I never took it off. It worked really well for me. And then I had protective light on my helmet. I got charged with light by picking up orbs. And I believe that was pretty much it. Of course, I had on Fusion Rifle Scavenger, Linear Fusion Rifle Scavenger, as well as Finders. So that's those perks on the helmet and on the boots. So that way you just get more ammo. Usually special wasn't an issue. You might be able to see in some of the gameplay that there was tons of special ammo on the ground. So that's kind of the loadouts. This loadout stayed the same for me for both boss fights. So this is the only time I'm suggesting the loadouts. Now for an exotic armor piece, I would go with Lunafaction boots because you get increased reload when you are in your well and or rift. So and what do we do our damage in? Well, it's in the rifts, in the wells. So like if you want to get off more rounds, you can have faster reload. Like I usually got off all 14 rounds of my sleeper. By the way, I had on sleeper reserves on my chest, in case you were curious. But with the Lunafactions, I would get off all 14 rounds in a single boss phase, which would typically tend to do close to a third damage. Now, depending upon if I put the whole run in here at the end or not, you'll see I had some pretty scuffed damage for like the first damage phase of Ogre. And then the last one I kind of screwed it up. It's kind of ran because my well was weird. So like the Ogre was just kind of bizarre. But normally you should be able to 3-phase it. Some people say they can 2-phase it. I'm not sure how they do that, but hey, maybe it's just because I'm not a professional like full-time gamer streamer boy, and it's just, you know, what worked out well for me. I got a day job. I'm victim advocate, so, you know, I don't game all day. All right, so how does this fight work? Well, you know, if you got the Fatebringer, you just want to charge up the rock. Since we're going to be doing our damage at the rock, it doesn't really matter, in my opinion, having to count. Because some people, maybe it's more important if you're on Titan or Hunter, will have to count off those 25 engrams you need to put into that crystal rock thing before you can do damage. But when you're on a Warlock, you're going to stay by the rock anyways because, one, the Ogre can't stop you, and two, you're already there, so it saves you some time because you don't have to like run somewhere else and then turn around to do damage. You just start doing damage. So it's just a lot easier if you're on Warlock just to plant that well right there. For the rest of the encounter, you know, you just want to go really take your time. Like, I'm not sure slow is the best word, but you don't have to rush anything. Like the only thing you got like maybe kind of rush is when you start picking up those engrams because you know you get 29 seconds until you blow up. So like you don't want to be like 2 seconds to go and you're like a mile away from the rock. You want to be aware of that. Otherwise, you know, just do the encounter. Just like take it one half of the room at a time. So like instead of trying to do like, I don't know, one room where you kill all the ads, grab the motes, then like run to the other side, just do one room, go to the rock deposit, look around for some ads, shoot them, whatever, then go do the other side, get your new cannon, and then go over and do it. Now something to point out is I didn't know this until I talked to a friend, but you don't have to jump on top of that little like rally, like banister thing, whatever, where the scorch cannon's at. You can actually grab it from under it. So that will help you out. When I was first practicing this whole thing, I was trying to jump on top of it, and then the ogre would blast me. That was about half my deaths, just from trying to grab the scorch cannon. But if you grab it from underneath, no big deal. So the scorch cannon and then lunafaction boots on the rock were two things that ended up drastically improving the difficulty of this boss fight. If you don't do those things, I found it to be a lot more challenging. But again, whatever works best for you. Just being a lunafaction, warlock, planting on the rock to do damage worked really, really well for me. Hopefully it works well for you guys. Alright, so like, that's the ogre encounter. Like, it's not super hard. Again, you just gotta practice. A lot of the stuff with solo flawless is just do it over and over. Don't go into these things just being like, alright, I'm gonna give it like 3 shots because Azatros did it on his second try. You know what else Azatros does? He does this full time. This is his thing. This is all he does. So of course he does it on the second time. I think the dude's really good. We're not him, or like Glad or Esoteric or whoever else. So it might take a bunch of tries, and that's okay. Life is about perseverance and not quitting. So I guess there you go. There's some like dad advice or something. I don't know. I'm not a dad, but I guess don't quit. All right, and expect it to take some practice, and you'll get good at it eventually. So that's the ogre fight. Once you get the ogre done, in my opinion, the ogre was the real big gatekeeper. Like the first time when I was going through this dungeon solo and I beat the ogre, I got all the way to the boss before I had a legit death. I say legit because I got to the Sparrow, I got all the way at the end, I completed it, my controller died, and the 3 ads there killed me as I was panicking because I was like, oh no, maybe I can do solo flawless. So I ended up doing that run just solo because I figured, let's practice the boss fight, which is another thing. Now that we're getting on into the Sparrow, if you don't feel very comfortable doing the Sparrow, maybe intentionally tank it a couple of times so that way you can get some practice. Just run through it, hop on that Sparrow and just do it over and over until you're like, yeah, I got this. And then it's not that hard and it's a pretty consistent thing to pull off. I do know some folks like Azatros who are like, hey, the Sparrow is like the only iffy part for me, but if you practice it, it doesn't have to be iffy. So I just want to real quick just show the Sparrow part. What I would suggest you guys have is hopefully you have that exotic always on time, that Sparrow that was from Scourge of the Past. I don't know why, it's way faster than the rest of them, and then it's got that cool perk where enemies don't like pay as much attention to you, so it makes it a little bit easier to zip around. Because when you're by yourself, there's no one to distract them, so you can zip around. Otherwise, feel free to follow the path I did on screen. To me, it was the easiest. I liked the left side, maybe it's because I'm left-handed, but it just worked out best for me. But ultimately, whatever works for you, works for you. So hopefully this Sparrow part, just kind of showing it was useful to you guys. You could use a sword when you get to the very end, because you definitely don't want to have those last couple of ads kill you and tank your run. That was pretty heartbreaking. That happened to me. It's like, oh, I got through the part that's supposed to be really iffy without dying, and then my controller died. So anyways, so maybe you do like a sword or something, so that way you can take care of those ads. The last thing I kind of suggest is every time you get to one of those zones, is hop off and grab a new Sparrow. Mostly because I'm not very good at Sparrow stuff, so I gotta use my bursts. So if I have an old Sparrow, like the one I've been using, I already used my 2 bursts. It's just easier to hop on a new Sparrow and have my 2 bursts over again, so I can like go side to side and adjust my mistakes. And then the last little bit is when you got like that tunnel thing you go through. It has like the fuse like time extension at the end of it. Maybe just go over that a little bit slow, because like if you screw it up and you go down and you're like off the ramp, you have to jump up and get off. It's just a lot of wasted time. So if you can go a little bit slow just to get on it, you're straight and zip off. That's probably the last thing I have. I guess the actual last thing would be to go on the left a little lift thing. I don't know why I can't hit the middle one consistently. I go at the middle, hit the edge, and it's just a big oof. So if I go on the left though, for some reason, worked out well. And there's also a mine time extension thing up there in the skull on like the left side, so gives you a little bit more time, which makes it even more easier, so it's almost guaranteed. So now we're gonna go ahead and just real briefly, I guess, talk about the shield generator thing. shield generator is really easy. It's just kind of a longer encounter. The main thing I found is just take your time. Like, I use lots of sword ammo just to like sort everything down, because I just wanted to get as many supers as I can, because if you haven't mentioned it already, or if you just didn't know, every 10 of those engrams that you pick up, every 10 of them, you get a super and all your abilities back. So if you're using the sword and you're just trying to get those 10 engrams so that way you can get your well, it's pretty quick, because like when you kill an enemy, they kind of drop the orb sometimes, or at least maybe most of the time, like on top of you. So you kind of grab them, and then of course swords are heavy ammo, so it tends to burn through all the ads pretty quick. I found using Wither Horde, the Battler, and then the Halo Sword works really well. I do have the Hero of Ages with Chain Reaction. I imagine that would have been just fine. Probably any sword would work pretty well, or any energy weapon. I did see one streamer guy, I was like, hey, run Wither Horde, Cartesian, and a sword. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of double specials just because I like all my special ammo going to one weapon, so that way I can use it more often. But hey, dealer's choice. And then the other thing is just, take your time. There's no need to rush stuff. Even if the servitor blows up, no big deal. It doesn't wipe you. It doesn't kill you. Maybe just run away from it just in case, because it does kind of give a nice big like Star Wars explosion. But otherwise, like whatever. Just do another one. Not a big deal. Just take your time and you'll be fine. So let's go ahead and just talk about the boss fight. The boss fight I thought was pretty easy. It ended up being easier in my opinion than the ogre fight, and I just really liked it. I don't know. It to me just wasn't that bad. It took me about half the time to figure out and actually beat the boss fight than I did the ogre fight. So if that's any indicator, if you get there, you're probably going to be okay. But here's a couple of things that I did. One, when we started the encounter, since I was on well, I just went ahead and for that first one plopped my well down and did my best to kill one, if not both, of those like mini bosses. So you got like the Shank and like the Randall the Vandal dude that's like named Rambo or whatever. Just killed both those guys or one of them, and then like would like jump out and either go to like an edge, or sometimes when I was practicing I would go behind like on that main platform thing behind where the boss goes for DPS. That worked out pretty well as well. Pretty well as well. So there you go. All right. Another tip I found that works pretty efficiently was the dude with the Scorch Cannon can be really annoying. Like when I was practicing, I had a couple of runs that just ruined because I didn't have a whole lot of health left, and he just like mapped me from across the map with the thing. It's got area damage. So if you're able to look for that guy and just kind of figure out where he's at and then just kill him real quick with Cartesian or whatever it is you want to use, that should help out quite a bit. The other thing that I guess there's a couple of things I did throughout this whole fight. Again, Lunafactions, because it's the same as the Ogre fight loadout. Fatebringer, Cartesian, Sleeper, so you can put that boss to sleep. Give him some Z's. Is I mostly stayed on the area that's on the left of the room when you first enter the boss fight. So like if you're like on the boss, like looking towards where you entered, it's on the right. If you just walk into the boss fight, it's on the left. I mostly stayed over there. To me, it just worked out a lot better. I was more comfortable there. Again, maybe it's because I'm left-handed. I don't know. It just worked really well for me. But if you want to do the right side, I'm sure it will. The key is just do wherever you want to hang out at. I don't suggest hanging out in the middle area though, because like the ads there spawn more frequently, and then there's just not as much good cover, because instead of having ads that can hit you from really one direction, which is like across by like where the boss is at in the middle, if you're on one of those like edges on the left or the right side, you got the ads in the middle, and then the ones that are on the left and the right, because they're up and above and they can shoot down at you. So it's a lot more fire coming in. And then of course there's the boss. So I suggest hanging out on a side. Some of the other stuff I suggest is whenever you get done with the damage phase, is always try to take out the Vandal and the Shank as fast as you can with Sleeper, but not so fast that you get yourself killed. Like I would wait for a rift, put down a rift behind like some cover so I can kind of pop in and out. I would just pick one of them, usually the Shank first, because I find snipers more annoying. Get rid of the Shank, then hopefully just kind of be able to have the Scorch Cannon dude down pretty quick after that, and then just kind of wait for how I could be able to grab some ammo and take care of the Vandal. I also did not worry about grabbing the motes engram things that the Vandal dropped. I just found it as kind of an unnecessary risk, because when we're going through this boss fight, it takes 60 engrams to charge up the rock to start damage. So that's just 3 of these like little Scorch Cannon bursts, because it's not too hard to grab 20 motes. This is the other reason why I stayed on the left side. it's a lot more efficient on the left and the middle to grab all those motes. I was usually getting 19 or 20 of them than it is to have like the right or the middle. Just something about how they land just makes more sense, is more efficient for sprinting through and grabbing all the motes. I will say if you're going to the middle as like the second set of 10 motes that you're grabbing, there's probably going to be ads there, and so I liked throwing my grenade on them, but sometimes I hung on to it and charged it up to give me health and then jumped through the middle. I also noticed the boss has a weird stomp thing. Like, at least the run where I completed it anyways, there were times I thought the boss was about to stomp me into Kingdom Come and like send me like into next year, but it didn't. So I'm not sure if that was an unusual thing, but just pay attention as best you can to where the boss is at. The other thing I was doing was whenever I was planting down all those engrams on the rock, I liked holding on to the Scorch Cannon, and really it's for one reason, because I have more of a view around my character, because if I wanted to just use a rift, then I wanted to be on the opposite side of the rock from where the boss is at. So if I have the Scorch Cannon on, I just found it easier to keep track of where the boss was, because it likes to teleport. If you have the weapon pulled out, I just had a harder time keeping track of where the boss was, and since there's ads around, sometimes the radar was a little tricky trying to do all that stuff. So like that was what I just enjoyed doing when I was putting down those engrams. Also, don't be afraid or shy to use a well to keep your happy butt alive when you're depositing those engrams, because if you're keeping track, you'll know which one it is for damage phase. So like you'll be like, all right, cool, this is like the last set, so you can use a rift instead, so that way you can maximize your well for damage, because I kind of like just using the rift on that last set of depositing those engrams, so that way I would just stay alive. And then when I was like, oh look, there's the sound, the boss teleported to like that banner area for DPS, put down the well, switch to Cartesian, proc the particle destruction, then just use sleeper and throw a grenade whenever it charges up, so that way I get a little bit of extra damage. That worked really well for me for DPS. Now the last thing I want to mention, and this is why I tend to take a while when I do solo flawless stuff. Like some people are like, yeah, look at me, I do like a 16-minute dungeon all by myself without dying. And I'm like, yeah, it takes me an hour and a half. Usually because I will play it pretty safe. So I noticed when I was practicing that it was a lot easier to take care of those two mini bosses, the Shank and the Vandal, if I had heavy ammo bricks just lying around the area I wanted to go to. So instead of just, having my full ammo and then killing ads until I have full ammo and then just start doing all the stuff where I could actually do damage, I kind of waited and dragged it out some to make sure there were some heavy ammo bricks on the ground so I could run around after the damage phase, get some sleeper ammo, and be able to take out that Shank and the Vandal a lot faster. That just worked really well for me. Once those two ads are down, and then the Scorch Cannon dude, it's pretty much a freebie fight until you need to do damage. And damage is really easy, because you just get to sit there in the well and just chink away. Sure, you might get flinched because of incoming damage, but really not that big of a deal. So essentially to me, the hardest part of this fight was just getting rid of those two mini bosses and the Scorch Cannon guy, and then after that I knew it was cake through damage phase, and I just started all over again. So hopefully this helps you guys out with this whole game, the solo flawless dungeon done. I think it's a cool dungeon, so I just want to tell you a little bit about it. So I really like the whole pirate thing. I don't know why. I love Pirates of the Caribbean. It's a pretty cool series, and I just really enjoyed it. So having this whole pirate-themed dungeon was pretty cool. Also, I had watched a video by Evan F. 1997. I think that's the channel name. He gives kind of some more history on the dungeon, like the lore, that kind of a thing. I just thought it was pretty cool. Wilhelm went nuts. He went nuts. He killed his fire team member. Well, actually, the first fire team member killed the other fire team member. Then Wilhelm was like, oh, I'm getting paranoid of you, the guy that was left, and then made him his slave. Like, he killed the guy's ghost and was like, haha, now you're like a human being instead of a guardian, so now you got to do what I tell you to do. Then Wilhelm gets all paranoid and kills that guy. And then they're down there for 2 months, and Wilhelm's like, you know what, my ghost is going to take everything away from me. So he stabs himself in the leg, gets the ghost to pop out, kills his own ghost, then is like, crap, I should have let him heal my leg, and then killed him. And then he ends up dying down there, and he's got a peg leg and one eye because there's crystals coming out of the other eye. I don't know. I just think it's really cool. And then of course the emblems, all pirate ship themed, like Pirates of the Caribbean. I just like it a lot. I thought the story was pretty cool, which honestly was most of my incentive for doing it, because I was like, I want to be like a pirate and do the stuff, because I guess got the mental state of a 12-year-old. So that was the dungeon. Hopefully this helps you guys out. I like it a lot. Let me know down below, again, if this was useful. And subscribe to help me out, as well as let me know this kind of content is the stuff you guys want to see. Also, I had a really long break, so YouTube's not going to really help get engagement and push this thing out. So the more engagement you guys can give me, like hitting the like button, commenting, subscribing, sharing, and that kind of thing, really helps me out, and I really appreciate it. Thank you guys all so much for watching. I will see you all in the next video. Have a great week, and happy grinding, y'all.